Let me rather send this. Okay. Onset, SOTM, SOTM, SOTM. USM. USM. Yeah. I think we can start. Hi, Walter.
Hello.
Yeah, I think we can start now.
Okay, just a moment, I need to zoom. I don't know which screen are you seeing?
You are seeing a slide, community capacity building in African
Okay.
context. Yep.
Thank you. So, thank you everyone for showing up for this session. Apparently I'm going to be your speaker for this session. And my topic is community capacity building in African context or in the context of Africa. And in my presentation, I think the case study I'm going to use is OpenStreetMap Kenya, that is OSM Kenya. As we continue with our presentation, I want to mention that I happen to be the community coordinator for OSM Kenya. And OSM Kenya started back in 2019, and we were only around 7 people started the community. We've grown to numbers, and at the moment we are over 200 members with around 60% male representation and 40%, of course, female representation. The structure of OSM Kenya is purely free membership. You don't have to pay anything to join OSM Kenya. And we have a composition, a complex or rather simple and complex structure of which is made up of youth mappers. We have students who are not members of youth mappers. We have young professionals and older people as well from other professions. We also have a lot of geo enthusiasts. The leadership structure for SM Kenya. We have a leadership structure. We always have the leadership committee who are around 12 people. Then we also have working groups which have different working group leads. So we have the programs, working group training, community outreach, and communication, of course, not community, I mean communication working group. They are headed by different people, and they are all having a team to support the entire leadership. Then, of course, we have the rest of the community who always show up through our activities, which are mapathons when we are doing campaigns. And we have a lot of trainings around Kenya and, of course, taking part in other campaigns around the world when we have, let's say, disasters, crises, and so on and so forth. We also trying to, or rather finalizing in registration of OSM Kenya as a legal entity with the government of Kenya. It's a long process. but it's worth it. We felt it was important that we register OSM Kenya as a community because we needed recognition, and we needed to, because if you want to start making change in the community, entire community, you have to be in a position to be recognized. And the first thing about being recognized is you have to be registered, or rather be recognized by the government that is in place. So we went ahead to register OSM Kenya as an association, because an association was favorable for us. We couldn't do an organization because we can't be filing returns and taxes at the end of the year. So we went for an association which doesn't necessarily have to file returns, and then we have liberty to look for money and do other things. Because if you want to follow us on our social media platforms, if you checked out OSM Kenya, you will definitely get us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Of course, we also have a website that is running. Then we have our Gmail. So quickly, our main topic of today is community capacity building in the context of Africa. And I think before we continue with the presentation, I will want us to have a chat. I want this session to be very open and free. I want us to have a discussion of how does the OSM communities in Africa look like? Because I think we are having a series of characteristics that we share across several communities. And the first things that I'm calling the commons are the composition of our community. Listening to many of the communities that exist, you realize that a lot of the communities have a composition of youth mappers, and those youth mappers who have left university. Then we have a small representation of what we are calling the young professions, people who've just left the university. And when you look at this composition, it plays a very major role in building sustainable communities around the world, or rather building sustainable communities, even in other aspects of of the society, not necessarily or not entirely in terms of geo-based and stuff. So when you look at the composition of the communities, we are almost having a homogeneous community. These are communities that are characterized by constantly doing mapathons. We understand that we are always doing campaigns. Let's say we are always communities around taking part in the monthly mapathons. When we are having a crisis, let's say we're having a crisis in Malawi, we go ahead and start mapping. And those are our common things that unite us all. Then we have things like skill resources. We are having people who are skilled in different aspects. I've managed to listen to people sharing a lot of things they're doing out there, and they are very nice. We also have looking at the financial capacities, and we say that this presentation is purely in the context of Africa. Most of our OSM communities don't have capital to run their own errands. Of course, we understand that we have a major issue when it comes to, not really a major, but we have a complex relationship when it comes to finances and issues registration with OSM Foundation. But we have to understand that finances play a big role in running communities around Africa, because number one, Africa is not entirely a revolutionized continent, but when you look at the resources that are available, it puts us in a very limited space to operate and grow our communities. So in this presentation, we want to look at how can we exploit what we have? How can we analyze the gaps that exist in the community so that we leverage on building communities that are sustainable, so that at the end of 5 years, when I finish being the leader or being the community coordinator for OSM Kenya, I have to come 5 years and find OSM Kenya has grown to a bigger space. Or after leaving my position, who else is going to take it up? So we have to find a way of how to manage our communities, because we want to build communities which are resilient, which are sustainable. So when you're looking at the needs, or rather the gaps that exist within our communities, and I'm calling them the spatial data needs and gaps, we are looking at the context specificity. We have to understand that different communities in Kenya, OSM Kenya doesn't have or face similar problems with our community in Ethiopia. So we have to understand we are having totally different community challenges and issues, and we have to address them from ground level, an individual or a community level. So we have to understand the gaps, or rather the context specificity of every community that exists. Of course, we have significance of existing data. We have to look at the data that exists, the OSM data. In this case, we are in an OSM conference, and we have to talk about OSM as our major open data that exists. So what are the data sets that exist, and how well can we utilize the data? These are things that we have to start talking about so that we see how we can make our communities better. We're looking at available resources, and when I'm talking about resources, most of the time, I always prefer to love to refer to mention expertise, that we have a lot of skills within us. In this call alone, I know we have people who are in tech, we have people who are in geo, we have people who are in the communication, in the business industry. How do we leverage all these skills that we have to come up with something that is sustainable, something that can hold the community together? And these aspects are what are going to build our communities to be resilient and sustainable. The next slide. All these things I'm mentioning are what we are looking at as the approaches to building communities which are resilient, sustainable. I know this topic has been talked about more often, but we have to keep talking about it until we understand that if we keep on running our communities, let's say since we started the State of the Map in 2017, if our communities don't evolve as with the pace of how things are evolving, we will end up running communities and keeping on struggling with because I will share this openly. We always get emails or getting people complaining that we are not offering them jobs, we are not having activities to do, we are not empowering the community, and this is within us. But then I'm just saying in this presentation, if you want to empower people, I think there are people who are more interested in seeing the change they're bringing in the community. And for us to go ahead and do this, we have to have a strategy. And this is how my entire presentation is built on. It's building a strategy of how we can empower the communities around us. So the first approach that I'm looking at is integrating open spatial data and the existing available data. Let's say if you went to query data on OSM from your region, you can see the type of data set that exists. So how do you leverage the data set that exists, and you look at the data sets which are probably not open from government entities, you integrate them together to build a data set that can be used, that can be more meaningful than the just open data that exists. In our previous discussion we're having today, we were looking at the positional accuracy of OSM data. And we are saying that if you give the data to an engineer, they might not use it so much because looking at the XY factor, you might find that your data is not really accurate to help you do structural development. How do we improve the accuracy data? It means we have to incorporate other technological advances. We have to come up with innovative ideas. I understand as OSM Kenya, we have a member who designed GNSS gadget to help us improve the, helping by collecting control points so that we can improve the accuracy of the data that exists. These are things that we have to look into so that we improve the accuracy of the data, and then the data can be more meaningful to decision makers and people who might need to use the data. So we are looking at another aspect of embracing OSM in academics. I want to understand that recently when we are having schools, and mostly I'm referring to universities, adopting OSM data as data that can be used. I don't understand why, because of course OSM is not as new, then is not as old as such. But then why is it that we haven't encouraged use of OSM in our academics in schools? We have to start cultivating the atmosphere around us in academics. Those who are people who are in schools, if you're writing a project, can you go ahead and do a project around OSM? Can we have someone defending a proposal where they're saying that OSM data, despite of the challenges that we experience with it, can still be used significantly to bring change in the community? And we can only do this by doing the projects that exist. So we go ahead, analyze the challenges that are there, and then we come up with solutions. Of course, when we are talking about building those are sustainable, resilient communities, we have to look at having focus-oriented campaigns. Instead of every day waking up, we can leverage on every mapper that contributes to OSM. Can we have a purpose-driven mapping? Instead of just going ahead and mapping everything because the data is open, you just go look for projects on the tasking manager. Can we create projects that we can work on a specific task? We tell ourselves that we are anticipating that we are going to have rains. Can we have these campaigns and we only map road network systems? Recently, I tried to download road data in Kenya, and you look at the data, the nature at which it's not complete, the incompleteness of the data, the inaccuracies. You're meant to ask yourself, how much can you use this data to produce relevant results? So we have to look at all these approaches. We have to look at the approach of inclusivity. How well are we integrating different communities? How well are we spreading the information so that we get people around the entire communities talking about, so we have disabled people taking part in participating in communities, and we offer them platform, we share training materials, and we have people talking about everything that exists around open data. And another easy way to make sure that all these things are working hand in hand and becomes easier, because if you are running this as an individual person or as a single community, it becomes very hard. You have to look at an approach of collaborativeness of the project through partnerships, engaging stakeholders. You can you can go ahead and approach organizations that exist. Nowadays, we're having a lot of organizations that are willing to work with communities. I can tell you this for a true fact that a lot of the current trends that are existing, that major funding organizations, I will just quote them. Let's say USAID, they don't want to give to other big organizations, or they don't want to give to organizations big projects to do them, because big projects, big organizations also have to look for communities to work with. But then if you want to tap into the resources being produced by big organizations, it means you have to be working with communities. And this is why we are saying that in this presentation, at the end of the day, we need to see results of how well can we work with communities that exist. And that is what I'm trying to share in this entire presentation. So some of the things we've worked on in OSM Kenya, I said I'm going to use the case study of OSM Kenya. We are trying to embrace the issue of skill-oriented learning. Skill-oriented is purely learning using a very focused way. You don't want to join every mappathon. Of course, we will join mappathons because it exists. But can we have more diversified trainings? And I mean diversified training. It's not always about mapping building footprints. I always say this. I realized that when you check my name on how did you contribute on OSM, you realize some of us have incredible data sets that we've generated, but most of them are building footprints. It doesn't mean they are not meaningful, but we can do something to the data to make it more meaningful so that people can use it at different levels. And we are not going to be generating data that can be put in repositories waiting for a crisis before it's used. Can we have a focus-driven mapping campaign that we are going to generate data, and this data has this problem is solving in the society? And that is the only way you can integrate your data and the society. That is the only way you can integrate the society with data. So, and a skill-oriented learning program purely is built around the pillars of problem solving. We have competency, then we have knowledge sharing. Knowledge sharing is one of the prime things that we have to embrace, that if you know something, you have to have the courage to learn how to present your skills to the people. And I like such conferences, and I also appreciate the fact that many of the countries are bringing up other new conferences we have. This year, we've already attended I attended OSM Tanzania, and they were sharing. These are the things I want to attend so that we learn what other communities are doing, so that we can learn and share. We can go, more of steal an idea, we can implement it in our communities. We have advanced training. It's not always about, logging in and mapping road footprints. Can you do something better with the road footprint that you're trying to do? Can you give it more finer data? And you can do this through, let's say, transport mapping. You can generate. These are projects we are trying to work with Trophy. I don't know if some of you have heard about routes. We're trying to do um, uh, public transport mapping, and we are going to do routes, and we are going to make sure that we are having an entire map of public transport routes within Nairobi and any other cities. And of course, you can go out and check about Trufi and the entire thing they're doing with coming up with technological applications that can help in, elevating safety issues when it comes to public transport in Africa and other countries. Of course, we have participatory mapping. This is an idea that has been discussed severally around a lot of people. And what we are saying is participatory mapping is just building data around the community. And this data has been built through remote mapping, which mostly we do. You can use crowdsourcing, tasking manager, go there, use any other tool that exists. You can as well as use that is open aerial imagery. Those are drone images. Then we are going to create interactive maps. Interactive maps, we don't want to have just general maps. We want to have better maps that are, we want to have better maps that are, that can speak to the people. And of course, we have the issue of quality assurance. Then, of course, these are things we've been trying to do. We worked with the Red Cross to do, that was disaster preparedness. Then, of course, we try to work to design an atlas map for Nakuru City for disaster preparedness when it comes to flooding. What is next for local communities? We are saying, how do we address the local contribution from communities? Because both local mappers and, in terms of change sets. And we have a study that happened recently. I know it will be published. And in this study, let me just go. In this study, it was noticed that in Kenya, only contributors from Kenya, 1% of total contributors only contributed to 50% of the changes that exist. So this is a very small number. These are 3 people contributing to 50% of the changes that exist. And we need to work ways of how we can improve the data. We need to have more money, to collect drone images to help us improve the data that exists. And these are things we are going to work on. And we are saying that, can we change the approach at which we look at issues? Of course, we have micro mapping, and of course, these are things we've been doing, crowdsourcing and interactive maps. We're talking about social maps. Can we have maps that are talking about social issues, safety issues, economic issues? Can we look at economic data issues? Can we look at environmental maps? We want to create data that is more focused instead of just having data that is, and when I'm closing up with my presentation, I try to come up with this, what I'm calling the community capacity building wheel. And this wheel is what probably will build around, what we can use to build around what we are called as communities which are resilient, more sustainable. And these communities are mostly built around what we are calling research. You cannot just go ahead and start doing work without researching about it. You should go ahead and do research about what you want to do. You have to look at problems that are existing, you analyze them in your community, individual community. We say communities, we are having homogeneous activities, but we are purely heterogeneous. We're not the same. The problems we have are not the same problems as Tanzanians. Cause resource mobilizations, we have to pull together technologies, resources that we have in terms of knowledge. Then we have developing skills. We have to go to the ground and train people. But of course, what we're calling Skillshare is share information so that we can empower other people. This is my will for community capacity building. And of course, what I'm expecting, if you can be in a position to start producing what we are calling interactive maps. This is a map showing, these are local people generating their own map using OSM data. They collect data and then they, we sit together and they do these maps. And then of course we can, we can use we want to see these maps and atlases within our communities. And this is will be our, I would love when we are meeting in the next conference to be presenting an atlas we did for another community. Let's say, when we are handling issues, climate change or safety, we come up with a map like this. And of course, having another map like this for routes in Nairobi. And of course, as I wind up, I want to thank you all for this session. And I want to take this chance not officially, I know it will be spoken at the conference, to welcome you to the next set of the map, global set of the map that is happening next year. It will be Nairobi. See you guys. More sharing. If you have a question, please, it's your time now. I have only 2 minutes. Anyone? Okay, if we don't have anyone with a question, thank you for tuning in as my listeners. Hope to see you again in other sessions. And I will beg to end the room because I happen to be the host of this room. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Walter.
Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.